Good morning and welcome back to the program where we explore the fascinating world of New York City real estate and the people behind all of it. Today we will talk about real estate education, get an update on the new condo development marketplace here in New York City, and also discuss the state of the economy. I would like to welcome my listeners in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco and this is Talking New York Real Estate. At this hour, since the firm's inception, Debbas has been actively involved in real estate agent and broker education. Several of the firm's attorneys are certified instructors by the New York Department of State. Real Estate Center for Success, their school for continuing education, offers a wide variety of accredited continuing education classes which satisfy real estate agent and broker licensing requirements. One of the founders of the school is here with me today. Also today, we are going to discuss the latest status of the new condo development business in New York City. Marketproof is a real estate intelligence and analytics company that makes real estate data accessible and actionable for every player in the marketplace. Kael Goodman, one of the founders, is here with us as well. And finally, the state of our economy with our chief economist and my friend Greg Heym. We will have all of that and so much more when Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this Tuesday morning. In the news this morning from my colleague Greg Heym, host of the great podcast, by the way, Crossing the Line, right here on our More Network, he says the third straight meeting the Fed Reserve had left short-term rates unchanged. They are done hiking rates. They expect to cut rates 3 times in 24, 4 times in 25, and 3 times in 26. There is no direct relationship between the Fed's rate changes and the 30-year mortgage rates. The average 30-year conforming mortgage fell to 6.95% last week, its lowest level since August. The stock market absolutely loved what the Fed said, with the Dow Jones reaching an all-time high, with all 3 major stock indices on Wall Street rising following the announcement of the Fed's rate decision and economic projections. Retail sales were up 0.3% last month, beating the Dow Jones estimate of a projected decline. The biggest increase in sales last month was in restaurants and bars, go figure, and gas prices fell 2.9%. Consumers continued to spend despite the depletion of the extra savings accumulated during the pandemic, but also adding a record $1 trillion in credit card debt. And in a major shift with implications for apartment buyers and sellers, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are going to identify buildings that they have designated off limits to lenders and reasons why, and share this intel with condo and co-op boards. The move will bring greater transparency to buyers and sellers and boards who have been largely in the dark about buildings that are designated unavailable for lending. Under the current system, this status is conveyed only to lenders. All of these guidelines were toughened after the Surfside condo tower collapse in Florida in June of 21. And finally, a one-time tented summer camp in Montauk is fast becoming a billion-dollar phenomenon. The formerly lesser-known Montauk Shore is a collection of prefab dwellings, or as some might say, trailers, is in this once blue-collar community on Long Island's East End, has for years been known for its paradoxical nature. It's the site of mobile homes, some of which not only belong to billionaires, but can also sell for millions of dollars. And 2023 saw this oceanfront community reach new heights, with the average sale price already in the $1 million range jump by more than double. In fact, the Post recently reported that a trailer sold off market recently for a record-breaking $3.75 million. And with me today are Kael Goodman from Marketproof, Pierre Debbas from Debbas, and Greg Heym, Chief Economist here at Brown Harris Stevens. All right, thank you everybody for being here. We have a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about education, we're going to talk about the stock market, the economy, and we're going to talk about the new condo development business and where we are and your projections, Kael, about where we're going. But Pierre, I'd like to start with you. You announced last week that Rec for Success, your continuing ed school at Debbas, has joined the prestigious ranks of NAR-approved schools in New York. So tell us first what that means, and then tell us exactly what your school is and how agents out there who are listening to this broadcast today can sign up and take classes.
So our school, Vince, we formed this school pre-COVID, and as you mentioned earlier, by day, I'm a practicing real estate attorney, and we built our practice in large part by giving continuing education classes to the brokerage community. And we saw years ago that there was a huge void in online continuing education. The content is very subpar. It's, essentially checking a box to get your credits. And we started working on an online school back in 2019, 2020. Pandemic hit and completely catapulted our trajectory for the demand for this. And during the pandemic, we issued, I believe, over 15,000 continuing education certificates.
Wow.
Yeah, we went on overdrive every day, doing 3 hours worth of classes.
I took your classes.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a great way for us to reach out to people and maintain, dialogue, friendship, laughter during a very challenging time. And then now, present day, we were fortunate enough to partner up with our good friend Neil Garfinkel to create the Real Estate Center for Success. And what we envisioned was bringing our two platforms.
Great, by the way.
Neil is fantastic.
When does Neil sleep, by the way?
I don't know. I really don't. He's really terrific. He couldn't be with us today, by the way. He was supposed to be, but he couldn't.
Yep, no, he's great. And that brings us to the National Association of Realtors. We're really looking to broaden our school from more than just continuing education credits, providing designations, providing content that's going to help brokers get better at what they do, not just providing credits. And now, the timing of this is so important with what's going on in fair housing, Section 8, discrimination. And you talk about Neil, not sleeping. He's probably the best person in America to educate the brokerage community on those topics. And those topics right now are walking liabilities for everybody. So when we talk about the school, we're talking about changes of law, how to impact the brokerage community. We're talking about, different issues we're encountering in the marketplace in being real estate practitioners, how brokers get deals done. And we're getting, creative. Kael's one of our instructors. We're doing a panel next year in the first quarter. You don't know about this yet, but we're doing this, about real estate technology and real estate, and how technology is going to change our industry. Completely something not legal related, but so important to what we do.
Well, I was going to drill down on that a little bit because, I also teach continuing ed. A lot of the students say to me, I'm tired after all these years of being in the business. Every year we've got to take the same 3 or 5 now, required courses, fair housing and agency law. It's getting a little monotonous. I mean, I have my comments on that. We'll get to that later. But they say to me things like you just said, why can't we talk about technology? Why can't we talk about the trends that our industry is facing? Why can't we talk about, markets such as we are in today, uncertain, and, where we can best keep our heads focused to continue to do business? Yep. And continuing education doesn't provide that yet. So if your school,
Yep.
and by the way, so how difficult is that to get the state to agree that we need these kinds of classes?
So I get all the classes approved for the Department of State by showing them a curriculum. The one we're creating now about technology and real estate. The state is becoming very open to this because, for instance, like AI. AI is going to, think 5 years from now, how that's going to change the brokerage community, how that's going to change everything. Right. So I'm thinking from the perspective of the Department of State. They're, they're a little slower. Yeah. So they're going to be, they're realizing that this is extremely important, the content we're providing. And it breaks away from the, the traditional basic fundamental classes, which are very important, don't get me wrong. But in doing these classes on a monthly basis, we have to be creating new content every month, which we're doing a great job of.
I mean, yes, you are. I mean, I love teaching the basics or the core required classes, but I also have so much more fun when I'm teaching what I call the electives, okay? And unfortunately, because we have 5 classes now that are required, there's only room for 1 elective. So we don't get to teach a lot of those electives anymore. And students are like, hey, come on now, I get this, but, right? Let's talk about fair housing. You mentioned it a minute ago. We always had fair housing. You learn it in Sales Class 101. You get, updated and reminded about it every 2 years in recertification. This past year, I think September, October of last year, the Department of State added 2 more fair housing classes, cultural competency and implicit bias. Tell me why, from your perspective.
I think it's what we've seen in the last 4 years with what's taking place in society with, I think it's all started with George Floyd, the light of racism coming to the forefront and, discrimination in the real estate community and this Department of State coming up with additional curriculum to help educate the brokerage community to, not think in a biased manner, in any discriminatory manner. And they came up with these 2 courses. They're difficult courses to teach, to be honest with you, because the framework for them, a lot of it, relates to fair housing, and a lot of it is common sense, quite honestly. That's why I struggle, in terms of, updating the content on those courses. But I think that the Department of State was well-intentioned. But there's certainly, tough courses too.
I actually love teaching those 2 classes. And in the beginning, I thought I'm going to have a little bit of a struggle with this because I don't really know what the state wants us to talk about, how they want us to prepare, et cetera, et cetera. But after doing it a couple of times earlier this year, I got into a groove where It's really personal. It's really about our own biases. And until you understand what goes on up here for yourself, you can't clearly articulate what needs to change or how you as an individual. I say at the top of both of those classes, I'm not here to change anyone here. Okay, that's not my role. I'm not here to change the world. If I could, trust me, we'd have a much better world, as all of us would say. I'm
Vince Rocco world?
Whatever.
Vince Rocco world.
If that works.
Let's all live in it, right?
Not the jet world, okay? We'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing is, if you can understand your own concerns or your own upbringing and your own biases, then maybe you can present yourself better to the outside world. I absolutely love teaching those two classes.
You mean it's good for your business?
It's excellent for your business because you're bringing people, you're becoming more inclusive, right? With your mind. You're doing this versus I'm fearful, stay away from me. What is this all about? It's all about fear. Okay?
Well, this isn't just real estate,
Bias is
too.
all about fear.
You know, as an executive here, I have to take those classes
Of course.
and online. Diversity, equity, inclusion, bias, all of that stuff. So it's just ingrained now. So it shouldn't surprise anybody.
That it's part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
We actually teach with Antonio Del Rosario. He's taught.
Never heard of my good friend Antonio.
And he does a great job. He's the one on our website for the recorded class. He does an incredible job. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I moderated it with him. He's been teaching for
so
years.
passionate about education, and he's always dragging me into these Rebney things.
Well, Vince, you're coming on in January to teach this class with me.
But
there you go.
We'll do
just
it.
going back to the basics, but I have to take my 22 hours? Or
22 and a half.
22 and a half hours, and I got to do that in January. So I need to sign up and get that done, right?
Well, you take our bundle. That's
There
the
we
thing.
go. It's a
80%
bundle.
of
It's
people.
got-
I would
Right for
hold out.
success. I mean,
I would
that's
hold
what
out
it's
for a good rate since you're
Yeah.
helping them.
We'll get friends and family. Friends and family. Yeah, we get you
Coupon
friends and
code.
family.
There's always the friends and family discount. You see, there you go.
Exactly,
Take advantage of
exactly.
it. But yeah, no, they're you have to reach. You have to do this with any time you're teaching. I think, right? You reach within, and you teach from who you are. And if you're teaching these two classes, it's all about understanding or making people understand that we are raised with fear. We walk our steps through life with fear, and until you're ready to acknowledge that and accept that and become more inclusive, you're never going to be successful.
That's very deep, Vince.
But and you know what? I get that comment in class all the time. They look at me like, "Wow, did he just say that? I don't have any issues. I'm not prejudiced. I'm not racist. I don't have any bad thoughts." Yes, you do. Think about it, and it's the way you present it. And they say, "No," and I'm like, "Yes, you do." Okay, because I did, and I worked on this for years in my own self, and I can present these things with an open mind or a mind that understands that most people are not where you are today. And that's okay. Maybe they'll get there. And that's all we can hope for. And that's why the Department of State says, I don't have enough people out there to go slap your hand because you did something wrong, you said something wrong, but I can provide as much education possibly to help you get, and I also use the example in class. I've walked the earth long enough, okay? I've been in corporate America. I've been in real estate for 21 years. How many times do we have to go through sexual harassment training, right? It's the same damn training every year. Why do we have to still do this? Because people misbehave. People say things that they shouldn't say. They can't keep their hands in their pocket. They do things. Why do you have these classes?
Yeah.
Okay? How many years am I taking sexual harassment? 35 years? I'm aging myself, but guess what? I'm old.
Yeah.
No.
Bottom line is that's where it comes down to. So when they complain about cultural competency and implicit bias, guess what? 10 years from now, you're going to still be complaining about it because they ain't getting any better. That's the sad part. What is your view for the future of continuing education as we go through life in the New York State? Because everybody thinks that we're certified in New York City, but it's really a New York State thing. What is your view for the continuing of continuing education? Where do we go from here?
I think it's 100% going virtual. When I do a live Zoom class that's free to the entire marketplace, goes out to 100,000 people. They invite every broker in the state of New York gets it.
You're good on Zoom and on camera. I took your classes during pandemic.
And I'm getting anywhere from 200 to 400 people signing up every month, and it's been phenomenal. I tried doing a live class a couple weeks ago. I had 3 people show up. people don't want to go live anymore. You know, the Zoom component and the online component of continuing education is going to be the vast majority of what users utilize. And I think that, you know, what we're trying to do is revolutionize the content to make it, like you were saying, more relevant, more interesting, more creative outside of the fundamental basics. And that does not exist right now. So I think that's
Adding
where
some
we have to go.
human touch to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, also the great thing was we bring friends like you guys. Like you guys are instructors. You know, we bring friends from the industry, not just lawyers. We bring mortgage brokers, title people, the technology, you know, real estate brokers.
Well, that's what's so good about when I
Apparently
see
not
your stuff.
economists, though.
Yeah.
I taught continuing education for years, and I think prefer, like, it's funny, right after we finish recording this today, I'm going to walk outside the store and do a Zoom for several hundred of our brokers. At least it better be. It's got to be Greg Heym numbers, you know. But
Mr. Numbers.
I'll tell you what I didn't like about continuing ed is the lack of enthusiasm. When you're in person, you see people just literally looking like they want to be anywhere else but there. And I know it's not me because
They don't feel that way when they're in my class.
Yeah, well, because you probably
They're
yell at
sitting
them.
at the edge of their seat like, whoa, did
No,
he
they're
just
going.
say
Is
that?
it, what time is it? Can I move? Can
Did
I
he
go
just
now?
say that? Yeah, damn right I just said that.
Got to rebrand it.
You got it. Well, again,
Yeah, well, there you go.
I don't teach continuing ed anymore. I'm not going to say I miss it.
I love it.
I spend
Me too.
I spend a lot of times teaching my own brokers. We do a lot of classes
Well,
here.
that's, yeah.
And, you know, and I enjoy that. But you know, after 20 years of, I spent 8 years working for Rebney. I hardly taught anything, and as soon as I leave Rebney, now I'm doing more work with them. It seems, and
I
that
lost my election to the Real Estate Board of New York. Residential, whatever. Anyway, there's always next time. Speaking of numbers, Mr. Numbers, the good news is that the Fed has
Mr.
kept
Numbers.
rates at bay, and as I said at the top of the show, they will drop 3 times each year for the next 3 years.
well, it's 3,
Hopefully.
4, 3.
3, 4, 3. Explain this to our viewers and our listeners out there,
I
because I
can't.
think
They
people
don't know
are
what to-
very concerned or confused about the direction of the Fed at this moment in time, even
Right.
with good news announced.
I'll try to sum it up. The Fed screwed up big time, let inflation get out of control, even though there were many signs. And if like you, they subscribed and read my blog, The Line, every week, they would have noticed that the Fed is supposed to keep inflation under control. Unfortunately, they're also supposed to help maximize employment. Having two mandates that are at odds with each other is stupid, and it should never be the case. They should have one function, and that's to keep inflation at bay. You know, for Game of Thrones fans, it's like the Night's Watch, got to
Well,
keep
but
the
we're-
dead from coming in.
But aren't we still comfortably away from that 2% target that they're looking
Right.
for?
So they're, and it's funny because they've recently changed the idea of this 2% target. Like, it doesn't have to get below 2% and stay there. They're using a more dynamic approach where as long as it's hovering around there somewhere, it's okay. So when you let inflation get out of control, and we all remember, you know, how rapidly prices started to rise in 2021 into 2022, their only means to stop it is to try to slow the economy down and take money out of the economy, which brings rates up, and then will hopefully bring inflation down over time. The problem is anything that they do takes at least 6 months to work. And they had to be very aggressive as they've been in decades because, again, they waited way too long. They forgot what the definition of inflation is, which is too much money chasing too few goods. We had both after COVID. We had supply chain problems, and we had increased the money supply by 40%. That's never happened before.
Right.
It's funny, when you see these press conferences, the Fed says more than they ever did before. I never hear Jerome Powell say money supply once. Nobody ever asks them
Correct.
how much money is that, because you could do whatever you want to rates to try to slow the economy down. But until I take money out of people's pockets, they're still going to spend, and they're still going to bring prices up. So inflation has come down dramatically, but as we pointed out on my show yesterday, prices are still going up. They're just not going up as fast, and consumers are tapped out. So everybody's saying, when are they going to stop? When are they going to stop? They can't stop prematurely because, like, when the doctor gives you antibiotics and says you have to take the whole 2 weeks, I don't care how much it upsets your stomach, you know. If
That's really true. You do have to take the whole dose.
that's what they say. No, but with monetary policy, yes, you have to take the antibiotics. You have to talk to your doctor. My brother's a doctor. You can have him on it, but you know, because if you don't finish the antibiotics, the infection could come back, and the same thing is possible here. The hard part for home buyers out there and consumers is, okay, inflation has been cut. It hit 9% year over year in June of 2022. Now we're looking at numbers in the low threes. That's great. Inflation is like a third of what it was. So why in the hell are mortgage rates still so damn high? And, the fact that they're going to cut rates a bunch of times because they know that they're slowing the economy down, trying to get a soft landing. Soft landing is when you get rid of inflation, but you don't cause a recession.
Soft landing is when I put my head on the pillow at night
No.
and say, my day is done.
That's a hard landing.
But the pillow is soft. All right, listen, we have to, I don't want me to interrupt, but we have to take a break. We have so much more coming on the other side of the break. You're watching Talking New York Real Estate. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, we're back. Greg, do you think the market is still priced for...
Well, let me finish
go ahead,
before we
go
were
ahead,
up. Sorry, but this is the economist in me.
ahead.
So you're in a situation where you've increased the money supply too much. You have to get that down, and that money supply is starting to contract. But the reason mortgage rates haven't fallen in line with the reduction in inflation is 30-year mortgage rates are about the future. They're not about right now. If I'm going to lend Vince money, and I'd probably do it. He looks, like he's going to
Good credit risk.
the longer I'm going to lend Vince money, I'm going to want a higher rate because there's a risk in that.
Right.
And that risk is really the risk of inflation. And I lend it to you at 3%, and then a year later, rates are 6%, and I feel like you took me to the cleaners. So the biggest issue this year that hurt mortgage rates and caused them to reach a 23-year high in October was that the economy outperformed expectations by a lot. We were supposed to be in recession right now, and we're not. Retail sales are still growing. Hard to believe with the amount of debt people already have and their savings being depleted. We're seeing hiring is still unbelievably strong. The unemployment rate is below 4%. There are still almost 9 million unfilled jobs out there.
Yeah.
So that's why there's this disconnect. I just wanted to finish that thought, and you can...
No, I agree.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
sure.
So can you just talk for a second, Greg, about the relationship between housing and inflation?
Sure. So remember that when the Fed looks at inflation, they look at core inflation because food and energy prices can go up and down. Like there was a big decline in energy prices in November, which
Eggs
kept
were up, eggs were down, chickens were not laying eggs.
No,
It was
I
big to do.
think I think food always seems to go up, but gas prices ebb and flow, and in November they went down, which kept the headline number pretty low. But core inflation was 4% year over year. The biggest component of core inflation is housing, right? And the problem with core items like housing is they don't change prices quickly. They're slow to move. And some of that has to do with the seemingly crazy way that the Fed and the BLS, who does the CPI numbers, look at housing inflation. They don't look at sales prices. Now, actually, I agree with their methodology based on this point. So wait, for you people in New York that are real estate brokers or professionals or people that own apartments in New York, co-ops and condos can't be valued using sales prices for taxation purposes.
So weird.
They have to use rental comps, state law. So same thing is true with the CPI numbers. They have what's called owner's equivalent rent. So they go, Pierre, you own a house. What would you rent it for? And they look at rental comps, and they do these in like 6-month intervals. So it doesn't change very quickly. But the logic in using rents instead of sales prices is you own a home, Kael. You're paying the same amount for that home, your carrying costs, whether it's at the value you bought it at or 20% higher. Your costs haven't changed. And this is also why the Fed doesn't really look at CPI or its little brother PPI, as we like to call them. They look at the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, Core PCE. The difference is CPI tracks the price of everything as best it can, but it doesn't account for the fact that people will change what they buy based on prices. Beef's too expensive, they buy chicken, right? PCE looks at what they actually spend, because at the end of the day, that's what really matters the most. So yes, housing, which is accounting for the majority of inflation in the core number, that number is going to take a while to come down, even though people aren't necessarily spending that much. Because remember, rents are starting to come down now, but they had been on a pretty unprecedented run.
They've been on a very high, and they are coming down right now. I don't necessarily, I think, agree with how, you look at housing whatever measuring rental rates, but because it's such a volatile.
Well, you're not
But
an
I get it.
economist. We'll
I'm not an
let-
economist. I know.
That was a lot that he just said.
That was a
And
lot.
It's rewind a few times, everybody, and listen to it a couple times. That's a lot of information right there.
Right, and it's accurate information. Pierre, putting on your attorney hat from
Mm-hmm.
Debbas, very successful firm, by the way. I think number 1 and number 2, it's up there in the realm of super talented attorneys.
Thank you.
Do you think the market is still priced for a too optimistic outcome regarding the future of the rate cuts? I mean, we are at whatever prices we are today.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows in New York City, we need to, bring prices down. Not really going to happen. Where do you think prices are going to go when these rate decreases start kicking in? Probably, as Greg was saying yesterday, maybe mid next year.
Right. Well, the whole thing, the whole point of these rate increases from a real estate perspective was to temper the rapid appreciation we saw from 2021 to 2022. And now that didn't happen, right? What happened? Transaction volume plummeted. Remove ourselves from New York City for a little bit because we're in a bubble, and I'll get back to that.
Right.
But the nationwide prices have actually appreciated low single digits since rates have gone up, solely because it's simply supply. Greg, I mean, you know better than this than me. It's supply. There's no supply out there. There's no development.
And the
There's
problem
no
is,
supply.
it's they've created their own problem because now that mortgage rates have shot up as much, people aren't putting their home on the market to trade up or down because I'm not trading the 3% rate for the 7% rate.
I'll give you a great stat. 70% of the mortgages in America are sub 4%. 70%.
You said that before the show.
Who's
That's
going
quite amazing.
who's going to sell?
Now, just imagine the supply that's going to be unleashed. And the problem is you have two ways to increase supply.
Right.
Get more resale product or build new product.
Right.
And what happens is when you have recessions or pandemics, building stops, construction stops. And then when the demand shoots off like a rocket like it did in 21, and even the second half of 20, there's no supply. This here in New York has happened in the 28 years I've been in New York real estate. It happens all the time.
Well, I'll tell you this. If you go back and you take the nation for a second, the nation's housing market, the lack of supply stems back to the financial crisis because the housing and subprime lending was the impetus for the financial crisis, right? Reckless lending standards. And builders didn't want to build homes for those years after financial crisis. They thought there was a glut of supply, which we had basically over a decade drag on a very limited housing stock being created. And that's what's creating this today. When we look at New York City, I remember walking around, I saw crane everywhere. And I used to joke they're building a high-rise condo every little lot you can possibly find. I don't see any cranes right now.
There's nothing. I mean, not to get ahead here, but just one great little anecdote here is that in the last 12 months in Manhattan, not a single offering plan for a new condo development of greater than 100 units has been filed. Not one.
Yeah, just look at the permit
insane.
numbers.
That's
You can
insane.
see.
Yeah.
Right? So there's nothing big coming. And the result of that, kind of talking about supply, is that the amount of supply when we talk about new condos has dropped from about 8 years of supply, which was too many, down to less than 4.
And how long ago was it? 8 years? I want to think maybe 2 years.
2019.
Yeah. Okay.
2019 is when it peaked.
People forget how slow the market was in 18 and 19.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
things-
It was
things were
slow
dra-
coming into the pandemic.
Definitely. Especially on the new development side, which we're going
It
to talk about a
was,
little bit.
yeah. And so the combination of homeowners being kind of locked into what they own, plus the lack of construction because of construction costs, land costs, financing costs.
I remember too,
et cetera.
higher rates stop construction too. That's the other, they get loans just like
Well,
Well, there's
buyers
some
do.
Cost of materials, cost of
interesting ways
labor.
in which that hasn't been true.
Really?
Which we can talk about.
I mean, not everybody's buying a trailer for $3.75 million. Okay?
Not yet.
It's like developers.
That may
have-
seem like a deal 20 years from now. Who
Yeah, and
knows?
remember,
Exactly.
New York City is Manhattan, right? But it's also Brooklyn and Queens,
Right.
Bronx and Staten Island.
Right.
And if you shift your focus out to the boroughs and go where projects are much smaller, over this last period of time, there's been no dip in construction. So what I'm talking about here is projects that are 10 units, 8 units, maybe 15 units. They have financing sources, non-bank financing sources, and there's been no dip in the
Well,
amount.
it's easy to do. Plus, the demand is there
The
because
demand is-
they're certainly a lot more affordable than what we tend to build.
How
in
many
Manhattan.
how many developers these days are self-financing? Because as he said, the developers have to go out and get financing. They have to worry about interest rates. They have to worry about a lot of things that a consumer does, right? A buyer. How many people on the development side are self-financing these days? I would assume not that many.
It's small.
It's hard to do. But isn't it more equity than loans?
Remember, in all these projects, you have a couple of different layers. You got your equity layer, you got a mezzanine layer, and you got a debt layer.
Correct.
They may have to put more equity in, but for smaller projects and people who have cash, they can lock up the deals. So people with cash are the ones who are able to get things done right now, or just developers with great credit.
Cash is king.
Cash is king.
Kael, let's talk about your November report, which I was just reading the other day. Month over month, deal volume increased by 9% to 167 signed contracts. The total dollar volume increased marginally to $473 million, and the median price per square foot grew by 2% to $1,654, and the median price rose by 3% to $1.6 million. Can you give us an update halfway through December how those numbers may be changing by the time you end up doing your December report?
So we'll be doing a year-end report in a couple of weeks, and we'll look at the span of the whole year. I mean, I think the key points are this, that the first half of the year was elevated. The second half of the year has been muted. So when we take the year as a whole,
Interesting word, muted.
it's going to come out just a hair higher than the pre-pandemic period. But the slowdown in the second half of the year has been a lot. Now,
Well, you can trace that right to when mortgage rates started falling at the end of 22.
They go hand
into
in
beginning
hand.
of 23 because the economy looked like recession's coming. All of a sudden in March, that whole dynamic changes and rates start shooting up. But the good news for the future is rates are down since peaking in the middle of October, almost a full percent.
right.
In 2 months, that's a very fast
It
change.
is, and we see that in Manhattan in the percentage of all cash buyers. So in at the beginning of this period, the percentage of all cash buyers was only 38%, which was the lowest we've seen in the last 8 years. Over the span of a little more than a year, the percentage of all cash buyers in Manhattan shot up to 72%. So I'm talking about new condo sales, but also resale. So both of those sectors peaked at the same number. And to Greg's point, that peaked in October. And so in November, we're still at the peak, and now we're starting to see it come down. So I think what we'll see in the December report is that the percentage of all cash buyers will finally start to recede, which is good news. I mean, yeah, it's great. Manhattan, people have money. They're buying premium products. But having lower rates means more buyers can come into the market.
I was going to ask you about the luxury market because I still think, years ago we used to complain things over $4 and $5 million kind of skew the comp, right? Kind of skew the data. In
You know what?
New York City.
15 CPW did the market reports
Well,
when it launched.
sure.
The Upper West Side looked like it appreciated by 80%.
One example. So my question is, and I'm happy to hear that you think that cash is going to kind of come down a little bit and more finance buyers are out there. How is the luxury market, doing compared to everything else? So when you talk about, these numbers in November, was a lot of it, luxury? And everybody defines luxury. I define luxury as maybe 5 and 6 million and above. I know some reports say 4 million and above.
4 million is, I think, the standard.
Correct.
And we apply that now to Brooklyn as well, which has started to get sales above 4 million as well. We did not have that previously.
Brooklyn's an anomaly. On a lot of levels, it's just an anomaly.
10 buildings crossed the 4 million threshold in Brooklyn this year.
Wow. Okay.
So, to me, the key thing when it comes to luxury in Manhattan, or in Brooklyn too, is that the amount of demand is relatively constant. It ebbs and flows a bit, but over the years, it's pretty constant. You have some, monster sales, 50 million plus, and we've had still a good number of those this year. But typically, it's pretty range bound. The number of luxury buyers in any given year just stays within a pretty narrow range. And so
you don't need that many because people always go, who's going to buy this product at 50
It just
million?
takes one.
And the resales too on some of them, because I do these weekly reports and we show the highest recorded sales, and you go, wait a minute, 220, is that a resale? And you go, wow, it is.
it is a resale, right?
And it's funny because a lot of people would always say, yeah, they might pay that much per square foot when it's new, but what's going to happen?
Yeah, so there are a handful of buildings that still get remarkable premiums as resales.
They hold on to their original
hold their
fame, and
value.
the value is there.
Now, but generally, new condos have roughly a 30 or 35% premium to resales. And that's pretty consistent. That number has actually grown over the last 10 years.
Right.
Because of bigger apartments, better amenities. The newer buildings are, so well amenitized. And, to kind of some Pierre's points about kind of this post-COVID world, people want more stuff in the building.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that as a trend.
Pierre, let me ask you, because we talked a little bit about it before the show, the higher end, the bigger, dollar amounts that people are spending, all cash, on apartments. How much of that are you seeing compared to, what I like to call the meat and potatoes, 1 million, 2 million, 900,000?
Why do you look at me when you say meat and potatoes?
You're the numbers man. You talk about everything. That's
Oh, you make me hungry.
When you talk about meat and potatoes, I always reference the $1 to $3 million buyers as semi-normal buyer in New York City,
Correct.
which anywhere else in the world would be ultra luxury.
Oh, ultra luxury.
What we've seen, in the last couple of years, the majority of our buyers have become pied-à-terre buyers and all cash buyers in the higher end of the market. Right now, we're getting a deal into contract today for $72.5 million. I mean, we're in the middle of an uncertain economy. New York City has its issues, and there's the high end is still transacting. It's the people that live here or that are interest rate, the semi-normal as I call them, that are interest rate sensitive. When you go from rates at 3% on a $3 million home that are now 7.5%, that carrying cost goes from what on a monthly basis, from $15,000 a month to $22,000 a month. That's not something that most people could absorb in terms of an increase in monthlies. An all cash buyer at $25, $30, $50 million could care less. Their monthlies don't change, and if they do, it's
their
irrelevant.
reasons and justifications are. I've heard some of the craziest when we were fighting the pied-à-terre tax, which is always still like waiting to come out again.
Right.
It's looming.
Especially when you have the budget deficits the city has now and is facing some serious challenges. But we were talking to someone who was fighting this, and the person actually had a rental that they were living in. He or she was living. I don't want to give it who the person was, and renting out, and actually not even using the unit. And that person said to me, if this law passes, I won't be able to afford not to live in my apartment. Which is weird to think, why are you renting in the first? But, these rich people, I'm a guitar player in my spare time, and I have too many guitars. But I can always justify buying another one. I start with I can afford it, and then it's like, well, I don't have this type. And I think that's the mindset of these buyers, which is why these deals, you scratch your head and go, there's a lot going on in the city right now. It has challenges.
Well, your pied-à-terre buyers are kind of insulated from that.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to somebody this morning, these buyers aren't taking the subway to Grand Central, going to work every day like I am, seeing what's going on. They're not walking home at night, across town, from their offices to their homes. They're going to a luxury building. They're getting in a car. They're having a car service drive them to, whatever fancy restaurant, whatever show. They're insulated from the day-to-day issues that have taken place in the city. For us that live here, expenses have gone up and quality of life is deteriorated. So I do agree. It is a problem for most of our volume, though, in business is transacted by people who actually live here. Correct. So, to your point, Vince, the trend has become pied-à-terre buyers, which has been nice for numbers. It's bigger ticket numbers. It's helping offset the decline in transaction volume. But I don't think it's really healthy or sustainable for our market in the future. We need to be able to get people back that live here, contribute local taxes, pay income taxes, and that are here 365 days a year. Not our townhouse buyers coming in for $25 million. That's going to use an aggregate of 20 days a year.
Well, in that 20 days, they're going to spend more money than the average family. And it's right to say, we do these market reports, which I don't really like doing, and you'll say, well, the average apartment price is $2 million. And people go, wow, $2 million, that's great. But then you point out that the median resale price, and the median is the midpoint where half the prices are higher and lower, is just under $1 million. So these new developments and these luxury sales do give people a misconception that more than half of what's selling that isn't brand new is under $1 million still, which is still really high.
Let's break that down for a second if we can.
Yeah, please.
More than only 14% of the market is new developments.
Yeah.
Only 14.
Okay.
Resale condos, right, which is the next tier down, is about 35%. And then co-ops, right, which is what brings that number down, is by far the largest chunk at around 50%. So
Well, they had a big head start on condos. Condos have only been around
there's
since the 70s.
very few condos, right? There's and there's still way more co-ops. And so part of the misperception is the result of the fact that only condos are built today, very few co-ops.
If they are, they're condops. If
Right.
they're
And the housing inventory, just talk about Manhattan here for a second, in Manhattan is growing at less than 0.5% per year. So that means all those older co-ops, which are less expensive, are by far the largest sector of the business.
and they're the value play,
value
for a
play.
lot of people.
Absolutely. All right, we've got to take another break. We'll wrap it up on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. We're back. So, Kael, we have so much more to talk about in the remaining few minutes, though.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit. You mentioned Brooklyn before. How are the boroughs stacking up? Where are these days more of the new condo development buildings being developed and are being sold? Who's leading right now? Is it still Brooklyn?
Yeah, Brooklyn has by far the largest number of condo projects, redevelopment projects, but they tend to be much smaller. And they also tend to be at a lower price point. But even in Queens, there are a lot of very large projects there.
Long Island City.
Long Island City, and farther east. But that really should be thought of as a separate market. Right? It's not the market we've been talking about today in Manhattan or even the Brooklyn market. It's a separate market, separate demographic, separate money is flowing into that area. And we're going to see over the next few years a lot more activity out there. And you should, again, we should just think of it as like it's really becoming 3 separate new development communities: Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens.
Interesting. Just like when people say, used to say in the past, how is the market doing in New York City? And my response is, or I had a response then. Today it's like, what market are you talking about?
Exactly.
Or how much has the market gone up or down since this point in time? And
Exactly.
you can't, this isn't like a CPI adjustment where you just say, okay, raise everything 5%.
It's different neighborhoods. It's different blocks within neighborhoods. It's different everything. Sometimes different buildings within neighborhoods. I mean, I hear things like a certain neighborhood is not doing well, but then all of a sudden something huge sells in a building in that neighborhood, and you think, well, there goes the comp, or there goes the thought that neighborhood's not really working.
And this is what at Marketproof we've really aimed to do, is to make all of that transparent.
Your reports are terrific, by the way. I love your report.
From borough down to neighborhood, down to building, down to line, floor, and unit. Marketproof makes all of that visible.
It certainly does. So what is your projection for, you alluded to it a little while ago, on new development? It's going to be slower going forward, but are developers, the people who actually put money into building these buildings, are they kind of incented to look at 2024 based on economic numbers, based on where the market in New York City has been in 2023? Are they incented to want to go forward in 24?
Yeah, I think so. But again, like I said, it's smaller projects.
Yeah.
They pencil out better. Land acquisition is more affordable. The construction costs are more affordable. The complexity. We veered a little bit today into various political topics. Yeah. Getting stuff built is not easy. It's gotten harder over the years. There's more bureaucracy, more hurdles you have to get over. And so that tends to skew things towards smaller stuff.
And a lack of incentives. The disappearance of it.
Well,
No
the tax,
421A replacement.
Well,
and
good point there, though.
That's
the
a great
tax
point.
base is incredible.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
And to that, I was out in Gowanus last week. I went out there. I try to go out like once a year and walk around and see what's going on. And the big projects, which are primarily rentals that got shovels in the ground, got their financing in place, those are getting built. And the scale is really incredible. These are big buildings, and there's a lot of them. But without these tax incentives in this city, it's tough. And our local government is, they're struggling with balancing out the various social and economic, I'm being really polite here, things that they have to deal with.
Well, they've come out and said, we're not giving incentives.
All right, you're going to be less polite. Yeah.
No, I'm going to be less polite. But look,
There's the numbers.
You
here
talk
we go.
about the vacancy in offices around this area. And, when I started at Rebney in 95, the Lower Manhattan Plan, it just, come about. because
G.
big 421G, right? And for those of you who don't, we're 421A, G. Those are the sections of the real property tax law at the state level. And again, that's another thing. This doesn't come from the city. This comes from the state. That changed, created the financial district as a residential area, got rid of a 25% vacancy rate in office buildings. The problem now is they're not going to offer those incentives. And from what I hear from people, the buildings aren't, they would take too much to modify them. Whereas that stuff downtown was probably cool. Here in Midtown on the Upper East Side, it's not.
Yeah.
We talked about it yesterday on Greg's show, Crossing the Line. It really comes down to, regardless of the price point, except the ultra high end who are paying cash, they don't really care about monthlies. But, for that meat and potatoes buyer out there, 1 to 3 million, a little under 1 million, it comes down to monthlies. Mm-hmm. And when the tax base here in town is significantly higher than it ever was, when common charges in condos are increasing for 24, an average of 5 to 7% or more, co-op the same thing, and we can't forget that within the co-op maintenance number is the real estate tax for that building, so you get a little bit of a write-off, but
And remember, with the budget problems, and remember the cuts that Mayor Adams has talked about, which really upset people, particularly when it talks about fewer police. The talk of increasing the property tax is now gaining, and that may be the agencies who have a vested interest in not seeing their departments cut. But remember, Bloomberg, 18.5% increase.
Well, Mayor Adams is closing libraries because of budget cuts on Sunday, in addition to cuts to the police department.
Let me throw a couple more things into this, because it's not only the taxes. There's the energy issue and the legislation around meeting energy requirements.
Local
law. The two scariest words in New York real estate: local law.
Yeah.
Local law is a bad word.
It's a big problem.
So there's that, which is looming, and that's a very politically fraught topic. And then the second thing is insurance costs. I happen to be the president of my condo board. And
good luck.
You
with
must
that.
be very popular.
Yeah.
In the elevator, he goes like this.
In the elevator.
Don't talk to me.
But the cost of insurance, has gone up a lot, while the coverage has gone down a lot.
Absolutely.
A lot. Mm-hmm. So, if you want to be a homeowner in this city, there's a lot of costs associated with it.
Look, it's like we always say: you if you make it here, you can make it anywhere. If you want to be here, you got to play the game. You got to go the entire ride, because it's difficult.
Yes, it
on
is.
Every level.
And so when we talk about the kind of middle tier homeowner here, those homeowners are bearing a lot of those costs. And it's if we, and again, not to get political here.
No, get political. Go ahead.
The tax rate for condos versus individual single family homes is at a much, much higher rate.
And the effective tax rates that in the poorer neighborhoods they're paying because of what happens on the Upper East and Upper West Side and the 26%, 20% limit on assessment increases. See, I teach property tax classes.
No, I keep putting the hook right in the water
with
for
my
you to bite on.
bestie Martha Stark, former finance commissioner.
Sure.
We teach a lot of these classes, and we always showed de Blasio's townhouse, which is worth several $1 million, but is being taxed as if it was only worth $500,000 because of the cap on increases. It say, well, most of the owned product in New York City, not Manhattan, in New York City is single-family homes. Let's offer them a little bit of protection so their taxes don't go up too much in 1 year. That's great, but over time, you have the disparity where in the less valuable neighborhoods, they're paying effective tax rates much higher. And co-ops, pre-war co-ops are grossly undertaxed for the same reasons.
Listen, I said the other day, I finished selling a new condo development on the Upper East Side, East 61st Street and 2nd Avenue, where, the average tax amount per year for a two-bedroom condo, 1,300 square feet maybe, was like $32,000 a year. Now, not for anything, but you divide that by 12, you add the common charges on top of that.
Well, make sure you're getting the co-op condo abatement if it's a primary residence. That'll knock 18.
And your mortgage and interest payments. Right. I mean, you're looking at $10,000 a month, maybe, to live in a condo on the Upper East Side at the mouth of the tunnel.
Right.
Okay? It's like, come on now. Mm-hmm. Pierre, from your perspective, what overall concerns do your buyers have when you're talking to them on the phone about all of the stuff we talked about today? Increasing prices, interest rates being ridiculous, Should I pay cash? Should I not pay cash? You know, what is the, you know, your best legal advice for me as a buyer? On and on and on.
You know, it's funny. I think I'm more of a psychiatrist these days than an attorney.
Thank you. Hello.
Because it's
We
really,
all are.
it's all
Try
interest rates.
explaining economics to real estate brokers.
Yeah, it's all interest rates and timing. Am I getting it at the right time? Am I getting enough of a discount to absorb an 8% rate? We're all bullish. You're talking about 10 rate cuts in the next 2 years. Are we bullish that in
3 years?
3 years, sorry. In the next 12 to 24 months, are we going to have a refi boom of a bunch of mortgages at 4.5% that were people who bought the last couple of years at 8%? That's what we're all banking on. But what if we're wrong? You know, who knows what's going to happen? There's so much turmoil in the world right now. We don't know. So that's the question, right? That's what everybody's talking about. We all have that mindset. Buy now, take advantage of a discount, take advantage of the opportunity. You don't have as much competition. There's no bidding wars going on. And, you know, you can stomach the increased cost for a year to two. And then you're going to refi and, you know, with the great saying, you know, you marry a home, you date the rate, right? That's the concept.
Well, but that's true.
But you're gambling right now because we don't know. I personally think that's what's going to happen. But at the same token, you know, we'll reconvene in a year from now and see.
And we're talking about a presidential election year coming up in 24. So, you know, with the Fed announcing these 10 cuts over 3 years, who the hell knows after 24 if we're going to continue with rate cuts? We may go back to
Different political
increasing
climate,
again.
right?
Yeah, but remember,
the political climate is going to have
the
everything
Fed
to do with that.
Is independent, and the chairman's terms cross over among administrations.
We know what that's all about.
Remember,
It is.
Don't
but-
be cynical.
Jerome
I'm
Powell.
with Vince on this one. I'd say allegedly, quote
Jerome
unquote,
Powell
allegedly.
was appointed by Trump and reappointed by Biden. So it's
I
not.
get it. I get
but
it.
whoever's in office wants low rates and isn't happy when rates go up because they
Precisely.
know what that means. Because you talk about kitchen table issues.
Well, there you go. You're taking my last question. Let's talk about kitchen table issues. Let's talk about consumer confidence. Because, by the way, you know, whether you're a buyer, even a seller, right? Or if you go into the store and you're buying something, you're buying a car, it's all about your confidence in that market. It's your confidence level in anything.
Well, I think it's about need, though, too. And you think about it, I always joke that you want to know what consumer confidence is going to be? Look at food and gas prices. Because those are necessities. You need them both.
Well, kitchen table issues, as I would call
Right.
those, right?
And, you know, food is just something that nobody ever seems to be happy with the price of. I go back to what my grandmother used to tell me, you know, 40-something years ago when I was a little kid, that, you know, oh, the price of everything's gone up. You know, beans are 6 cents now.
I think we've heard that all our life.
Right, we've heard that.
Loaf of bread. That's
They
a
seem to
famous
forget
one.
the other side of that, which
Yeah,
is
right. A loaf of bread. Exactly.
wages are rising at a very good pace. Now they've come down, but they're
Yes.
rising faster than prices now. That hasn't been the case most of the last couple of years. It's been the other way around. I think that the problem is political climate is what it is, and people do seem to be very mad all the time. It's not the only time in this country's history where that has happened. We've had a civil war. We've had some terrible things happen in this country. People have always fought.
Right.
Social media probably makes that worse. But when people look at the end of the day, especially this time of year, people are finding out if they're getting a raise or they're getting a bonus. It's a very tense time for a lot of people because a lot of people are barely getting by. We talked about $1 trillion in credit card debt. At some point, that's no more. Like there's no more room. The student loan payments have restarted. Now we found out that the vast majority of student loan borrowers didn't pay their bills, even though they were supposed to, which is interesting. And people have to make those decisions. It used to be like, where are we going to go on vacation? Now it's like, well, we can't go on vacation. What are we going to do about the car that needs to be fixed? How are we going to continue to go to the supermarket every week when it used to be $100, now it's $150? Can we go out to eat where, you know, the prices are higher? Now a lot of places, particularly in Long Island, are tacking on a credit card surcharge. So it's on top of the increased prices, there are additional fees. We've seen airlines do this. It's killing you, right? They're like, what are you going to, is the air still free? Like, I think people are thinking that.
Listen, I was teaching last week and feeling rushed and harassed and whatever between classes and whatever. So I ran downstairs to the street, okay? And I said, you know what? I feel like having a hot dog. I haven't had a hot dog, as my dad used to call them, dirty water dogs on the street, off the cart. You know.
Did you?
I did, but I hadn't had it in years. So I go downstairs and I ordered 2 hot dogs. I wanted onions on top of the hot dog. We don't have onions. Okay, can you just put mustard? Great. 2. And I said, I'll take that little thing of French fries. Okay? I gave the guy $20 bill. He gives me $4 back in change. So I'm like, wait a minute, I gave you a 20. He said, yeah, it's $16.
Wow.
Oh,
I said,
yeah.
for 2 hot dogs and a little bit of French
Yeah,
fries?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Did I enjoy that hot dog? No. I was cursing all the way back
Wow.
to the classroom. While I was eating it, I was annoyed. I was pissed off. I was whatever. $16 for 2 hot dogs and French fries. To your point, right? Kitchen table issues are what people are concentrating on. Housing numbers, housing, interest rates. Everybody sits back and says, well, I used to be able to do that. I go to the grocery store, a little white bag on my bodega on the corner of Broadway where I live, $60, $45, $52. And I'm thinking,
I didn't get anything.
how many things are in that bag? And I still forgot to get, I get home and I say, oh, damn, I forgot to get this. I forgot to get $60.
But you're forgetting too. What
and I
Kael
can't,
said about insurance. I just
Forget that.
I had been with the same insurance company for 25 years. All my policies there. They sent me renewals that were ridiculous.
20% higher?
And then I'm asking like friends of mine about the auto insurance. I have 2 cars on my policy. My wife and I have spotless driving records.
Yeah, well.
I found auto insurance $3,000 cheaper than what I was paying. I found umbrella policy a quarter of what I was paying. Thanks for the loyalty. I'm not going to name the company, but it's kind of ridiculous. And then, of course, what happens? We changed our insurance last week. And 5 days later, my wife gets sideswiped by a 17-year-old driver.
Welcome to the new insurance company. Hello. Did you lie to me on your application? All right, that's all the time we have left. A bro show today, but a real good one. Very informative. We're coming right back with my thoughts of the day and thoughts of the week. Don't go anywhere. All right, everybody, my thoughts for this week. When it comes to discussions about the economy, the idea that there are 3 sides to every story could be interpreted in the following way. One side represents the perspective of governmental officials and policymakers for making economic and implementing policy. This may include monetary policy, interest rates, aimed at influencing economic conditions. The second point of businesses, companies are affected by economic conditions, regulations, and government policies. Their experiences vary based on the sector, size of the business, and its specific circumstances. Policies that are in one industry might pose challenges to another. And the third side is the perspective of consumers. This view encompasses the experiences of individuals and how, including their employment, income, cost of living, overall economic well-being, or as I say, kitchen table. Consumer spending behavior by factors such as security, inflation, and economic policies. Understanding the different perspectives is crucial for a comprehensive analysis of the economy, allows a more nuanced discussion of economic issues, and helps to appreciate the complexity of the economic landscape. Economic policies and decisions can have far-reaching effects, and considering these different angles can contribute to more informed and balanced discussions. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. In addition, if you want to email me at the show now, you can at talkingnyc@bhsusa.com. And for more information regarding attending the Real Estate Center for Success or hosting or sponsoring classes, please email them at info@recforsuccess.com. Norman Vincent Peale says, shoot for the moon, everyone. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And to my viewers and listeners all around the world, from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate, thank you again for spending a part of your day with us. We are taking a holiday break and will return on January 9th. I want to wish everyone a safe and cheerful holiday season and a very happy new year. I will see you in the new year. Goodbye, everybody.